Last time, the Han army's benevolence was just the appetizer. The main course was their surrender policy, a 5-year labor sentence that could be erased by recruiting others. A brilliant, ancient pyramid scheme. This sparked a master plan. In the dead of night, the entire militia defected, stealing every last weapon and abandoning the professional soldiers to their fate. The Xian regulars woke up unarmed, trapped on a mountaintop, facing a forest of steel. But instead of a slaughter, the Han army unleashed a psychological symphony of terror, chanting, stomping, and banging shields until their enemies were shattered. But the true genius was the final act, staging a chaotic retreat to sneak Anvil and his remnants, now a massive Trojan horse, straight into the heart of the enemy's final stronghold. The Xian tribe leadership decided to call up the militia to fill the gaps on the front lines. However, what happened next nearly made their eyes pop out of their heads. The militiamen, who had always been obedient and constantly shouting about defending our homeland, now refused to be moved. Not a single one. This was unacceptable. The elders and the great chief were frantic, immediately sending people to find out what was going on. The result of their inquiries was a shocker. It turned out that the remnants brought back by Anvil had been spreading rumors among the militia, turning all of them against the leadership. With the decisive battle for their survival just around the corner, their own house was now divided. This was absurd. The Xian tribe leaders put their heads together and concluded that the problem must be Anvil. After all, he wasn't a native of Bamboo Island, was he? The Xian chief, unable to mobilize the militia, was furious. "Men," he roared, "bring Anvil to me." He and the other elders were going to confront this traitor face to face. In the main hall of the Xian chief's newly built residence, the atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Anvil." The Xian chief slammed his hand on the table, making the teacups jump. "I made you an elder because I valued your skills and your contributions to the tribe. Why did you betray me? Tell me the truth. What did you say to those militiamen?" Anvil, his arms held tightly by 2 guards, stuck out his neck defiantly. "What they said, how should I know? Their mouths are their own. Can I control them? At most, they were scared by the Han army a few days ago and advised their fellow villagers not to go to their deaths. They're cowards. What can I do about it?" You. The Xian chief trembled with rage. "They're scared because you're incompetent. If you hadn't failed to defend Clear Green Gorge, they wouldn't be in this state." "I'm incompetent," Anvil sneered, stretching his neck even further, like a victorious rooster. "Huh? With that handful of soldiers and those pathetic weapons, you wanted to fight the heavenly army of the Han tribe? Is your head filled with shit? If you're so capable, why didn't you go defend it? You were just as scared of dying. Hiding in your home, putting on your chiefly airs, what good is that? Shut your mouth." Crash. The Xian chief's face turned red, then white with fury. He snatched a blue and white porcelain teacup from the table and smashed it on the floor. The platinum and gold elders immediately jumped up, pointing at Anvil's nose and cursing. "Anvil, don't think that just because you're an elder, you're something special. Take a look at yourself. You're nothing but a savage who once worked for the Han tribe. If it weren't for our pity, would you be where you are today?" "Exactly. If it weren't for your blacksmithing skills, do you think you could be called one of the 3 golden elders alongside us? Huh. Take a piss and look at your own reflection. What do you think you are?" The other elders, in charge of agriculture and construction, stood by with their arms crossed, watching the show, a clear, none-of-my-business attitude on their faces. Even at this life-or-death moment, these people were still forming cliques and attacking each other instead of uniting. "Ha ha ha." Anvil suddenly burst out laughing. "A savage? So what if I'm a savage? Even if I am, I'm still better than a bunch of dead men. When the Han tribe breaks in, we'll see who dies first." You surrendered to the Han tribe?" The platinum elder's face changed, his eyes filled with suspicion. The gold elder was both shocked and furious, blurting out, "Aha, I knew it. I was wondering how over 5,000 men at Clear Green Gorge could lose so quickly. It was you who surrendered and betrayed us. And now you come crawling back, pretending, trying to sell us out again, aren't you?" His words sent a jolt of alarm through all the elders. The Xian chief's face turned deathly pale, the finger he pointed at Anvil trembling. "Anvil, did you or did you not surrender?" Just then, Anvil, held in the middle of the hall, suddenly flexed his shoulders. Crack! The two guards holding his arms felt a massive force and were thrown off. Anvil stood up straight, surveyed the crowd, and laughed heartily. Surrender? Ha ha ha. What a joke. Do I even need to surrender? I was always a man of the Han tribe. You. The Exine chief, overcome with shock and rage, pointed at Anvil and shrieked at the guards in the hall. Quick! Seize him! Kill this traitor for me! But in the next second, Anvil, now free, drew the saber from his waist with a shing. He took 2 quick steps forward. A flash of cold light streaked across the hall. Swish! The next moment, the Exine chief's head, still wearing its tall hat, flew into the air. The headless body spurted a fountain of hot blood toward the ceiling, then slumped back in its chair before slowly sliding to the floor. The head rolled a couple of times, coming to a stop right at Anvil's feet. Anvil, holding the blood-dripping saber, spun around, his gaze like lightning as he swept it over the stunned crowd in the hall. I'd like to see who dares to touch me. Narrators aside, in terms of acting, Teacher Anvil has just given a masterclass. From the build-up to the final explosion, the emotions layered perfectly, a truly explosive performance. And that final line, "I was always a man of the Han tribe," is a textbook example of a villain's reveal. I suggest the Exine tribe leadership do some collective soul-searching. Why are your villains so easily turned? Is it the pay, or is there a problem with the corporate culture? The construction elder, usually as timid as a mouse, collapsed onto the floor in a heap, his eyes rolling back in his head as he foamed at the mouth. The millet, bean, and livestock elders were also scared out of their wits. They supported each other as they stumbled back several steps, nearly crashing into the wall. The gold and platinum elders, however, were furious, their eyes bulging like bronze bells as they stared at the bloody scene, as if trying to skewer Anvil with their gazes. You killed the great chief. You're a dead man. The gold elder's face twitched uncontrollably, his voice trembling like a leaf in an autumn wind. Men, guards, seize this traitor. The platinum elder next to him finally reacted, letting out a shriek and bolting out of the hall, faster than a rabbit. The millet, bean, and livestock elders, seeing someone take the lead, snapped out of their daze and scrambled after him. The gold elder looked at the spineless trio with utter contempt, then turned to the 2 guards who had been holding Anvil. "What are you 2 standing there for?" he roared. "Didn't you see him kill the great chief? Kill him." However, the 2 guards merely shot him a cold glance, as if looking at a fool, and completely ignored him. Just then, the guards outside heard the commotion and charged into the hall, brandishing their sabers and howling. But before they could get inside, the 2 guards who had been standing still suddenly moved. They didn't attack Anvil. Instead, with a shing, they drew their own sabers and blocked the doorway. Taking advantage of their comrades' lack of preparation, with 2 swift thwacks, they cut down the first 2 unlucky men who rushed in. What? The gold elder was completely dumbfounded, his face a perfect picture of "Who am I? Where am I? What's happening?" He pointed at the 2 guards who had suddenly turned, trembling as he backed away, and roared with a mixture of shock and anger. You 2, you're Han tribe spies too." The 2 guards still ignored him, focusing on fending off the enemies pouring in from outside. Suddenly, a cacophony of battle cries erupted from the courtyard outside the hall. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of clashing swords was incessant, interspersed with the swoosh of crossbow bolts cutting through the air. The fighting in and around the courtyard lasted less than a minute before falling completely silent. Only the pig-like squeals of the few elders who had managed to escape could be heard. Who are you? Let me go? Or none of you will get out of here alive." This was the Platinum Elder's surprisingly strong-winded threat. Not get out alive? Heh, doesn't matter, a gruff voice immediately shot back. "Even if I die here, my son will inherit my military honors and my title. It's worth it. What do you want? Don't kill us. We surrender. We know all about the farmlands and the planting seasons. Your chief will definitely have use for us." Yes, I surrender too. I know how much livestock the tribe has, the annual yield. You can't kill me. Don't kill me. I surrender too. I'm very useful." In the courtyard, the pleas of the millet, bean, and livestock elders rose and fell, each one scrambling to showcase their value. terrified that a moment's hesitation would result in a swift beheading. Traitors! You 3 traitors! The Platinum Elder, seeing their shameless surrender, was so enraged he rushed forward to fight them. Unfortunately, before he could land more than a couple of blows, he was easily pulled away by several Han scouts, bound like a caterpillar, and gagged with a rag, left to wriggle on the ground with muffled cries. The 3 elders who had offered to surrender received no better treatment. They were also trussed up like dumplings and given the same treatment. As for the Prohan construction elder, he was currently in a state of utter confusion. He wanted to surrender, but upon careful consideration, he realized that he was just a construction foreman. The Han tribe's building techniques were far superior to his. His skills would probably not even qualify him as an intern over there. So, how was he supposed to surrender? What could he offer as a pledge of allegiance? While he was agonizing over this, he too was bound like a caterpillar and sent to join his colleagues. You all, this was all planned beforehand. In the hall, the sole surviving Gold Elder finally realized the gravity of the situation and no longer dared to shout. He didn't know if Anvil and his men would make it out of Clearwater Valley alive, but he knew that if he said another word, he definitely wouldn't live to see that moment. You what? Just wait for death. Anvil couldn't be bothered with him. He waved a hand at his men by the door. Take him. 2 Han scouts immediately stepped forward and, in the same fashion, tied up the Gold Elder securely. Next, Anvil had someone temporarily tend to the Exian chief's body, preparing to take it back as proof of his success, then began to issue orders for the cleanup. The 20-odd Imperial Guard agents who had infiltrated, plus the 300 scouts who had just joined them, immediately began a major purge of the Exian tribe's upper echelon. The Exian chief's direct relatives, 3 generations up and down, brothers and sisters, nephews and nieces, not a single one was to be missed. The elders' families were the same. No extermination of the 9 clans, but all direct relatives within 3 generations had to be brought under control. Killing them wasn't the point. The point was not to let them escape. If even one got away and later used blood ties to stir up trouble on Bamboo Island, it would be a huge problem. The search and capture operation went exceptionally smoothly. The Imperial Guards leading the way had been with Anvil for 2 years and knew the area like the back of their hands. Combined with the fearless assaults of the 300 elite scouts, the pampered families of the elders and the chief's relatives were no match for them. In just 2 hours, 500 or 600 people were all captured. The entire operation was carried out in silence, without causing any major reaction. The militia and their families in the valley had long been turned. They were practically begging for the Han army to arrive, so why would they obstruct them? And the 2 regular army brigades guarding the valley entrances were still nervously watching the Han formation opposite them, completely unaware that their home base had just been sacked. That afternoon, after the purge was complete, the winter sun was just right. The Han tribe finally sounded the horn for the decisive battle. Anvil was in charge inside the valley, holding all the militiamen and their families, as well as the newly captured high-ranking Exian tribe members. His job was to watch the home front and guard the grain. As for the decisive battle, you must be joking. The 10,000-plus elite Han soldiers baying for blood outside the valley were more than enough to crush the Exian tribe to dust. Narrators aside, a perfect decapitation strike. From psychological warfare to physical elimination, every step was interlinked, the pacing tight. The Exian tribe leaders were still in a meeting, bickering, while their homes were being ransacked. It just goes to show that even the strongest fortress can be brought down from within. Also, the survival instinct-driven millet, bean, and livestock elders have successfully demonstrated what it means to have the right skills for the right surrender. As long as the militia stayed out of it, Blooddrinker figured that dealing with those 2 brigades would be as easy and pleasant as a home-cooked meal. And indeed it was. At high noon, when the flagpole's shadow was at its shortest, Blooddrinker finally gave the order for the general assault. Fire! At the 2 entrances to Clearwater Valley, the artillery battalions of the Tigers Might Guard lined up the 20 field cannons they had brought, 10 at each entrance, their dark muzzles aimed directly at the enemy formation. Load, ignite. Boom, 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 boom. The thunderous roar of the cannons echoed through the valley, reverberating between the mountains, making one's eardrums numb. Of course, in order to capture more prisoners for labor, They used the smallest powder charges and the most common solid iron cannonballs. This ammunition had limited killing power. But Blooddrinker wasn't counting on it to kill people. What he wanted was the overwhelming, earth-shattering shock effect. Acrid smoke, accompanied by dazzling flashes of fire, erupted from the large, silver-gray iron tubes. Then, black shadows the size of millstones whistled through the air and crashed into the Exian tribe's formation. The defenders' formation, only 3 or 4 ranks deep, was as fragile as paper in the face of the cannonballs. The unlucky souls hit by the cannonballs were instantly torn to pieces, their parts flying everywhere. After a few volleys, although not many were killed, the gruesome manner of their deaths terrified everyone. Who had ever seen such a thing? One moment, a living, breathing person is standing next to you, joking around. The next, with a bang, they explode on the spot. This was too damn scary. What could they do when they were scared? Run. However, they had just turned to flee when, from behind them, came the scalp-numbing charge of the Han tribe's horns. Woo-whoop. Several thousand Han soldiers, howling like tigers descending a mountain, pounced on the fleeing enemy. A textbook rearguard attack unfolded. The last 2 regular army brigades of the Exian tribe didn't even make it a mile before they were surrounded at the valley entrances like dumplings. The rest of the story played out much like the scene at Clear Green Gorge. First, a psychological offensive of surrender and live. Then, Anvil, at the opportune moment, paraded the unresting head of the Exian chief and a procession of trussed-up elders before the enemy lines in a touring exhibition. With no escape and no hope of survival, the remaining soldiers of the Exian tribe finally laid down their arms. As the last pocket of resistance collapsed, the Exian tribe, once the undisputed hegemon of Bamboo Island, officially became a thing of the past. What followed was the post-war process. Blooddrinker began to arrange his troops, stationing the various guards at their designated locations. Xue Qingyao, on the other hand, started organizing public trials and arranging for his men to take over the administration of Bamboo Island's 6 commanderies. Everything was ready. All they needed was a reply from you, their supreme leader, and they could publicly execute the high-ranking officials and, following your orders, begin their grand development of this new land. 2 days later, in Hanyang City, you were in your study, receiving the final battle report from the front lines on Bamboo Island. In fact, you had been receiving battle reports every day for the past few days, as you had specifically requested. So, when the final victory report arrived, you were pleased, but not surprised. Your biggest concern was that some of the Exian tribe's high-ranking officials might have escaped, which would lead to endless trouble. Fortunately, the report clearly stated, all 10,000 of the Exian tribe's regular troops had been captured. The Exian chief had been killed on the spot, his body preserved with lime for future exhibition. All the elders had been captured. The families of both sides were basically all rounded up. A few who were mixed in with the brigades were being identified. Reading this, you finally breathed a sigh of relief. At the end of the report were Blooddrinker's deployment plan and Xue Qingyao's governance plan. Xue Qingyao also made a special mention of the millet, bean, and livestock elders, whose will to survive was exceptionally strong. They had surrendered voluntarily and offered their loyal service to you. As for the construction elder, although he hadn't said anything, everyone knew he was pro-Han and could be won over. Xue Qingyao asked you how to deal with these people and offered his own suggestion. Appropriately employing some of the old, established local clans would help to quickly stabilize the situation. This, as it happened, coincided with your own thoughts. What you wanted was a bamboo island that could lay golden eggs, not a bottomless pit that required constant blood transfusions. You weren't in the business of losing money. Husband, is the fighting at the front not going well? Little Dai, her belly showing, gracefully walked into the study. She and Zhang were pregnant again, both 3 months along, their bellies already slightly rounded. Ahem, no. You quickly stood up and carefully helped her to a seat. The fighting went very well. It's over. We won a great victory. That Exian chief, his head is on display. You gently caressed her belly as you spoke. Xue Qingyao is asking me what to do next. I was just thinking about it. It's all right, don't worry. Oh, as long as we won. Little Dai placed her hand on yours, feeling its warmth. Were our casualties heavy? You couldn't help but smile. stroking her long hair as if petting a cat. Casualties? How could there be any casualties? I spent so much money and grain to give them the best equipment. Even if our soldiers stood in a line and didn't move, the Exian tribe couldn't even bite through their armor. Then why don't you seem very happy? Little Di blinked, voicing her confusion. I'm not unhappy. You shrugged helplessly. But how happy do you want me to be? Should I laugh to the heavens 3 times and then jump around in the courtyard? I'm a father now. I can't be so unrestrained. You pulled her into your arms and said softly, I have an idea. Bamboo Island has just been conquered, and there's a lot of rebuilding to do. I want to go see it for myself. But I'm worried about you and Jianing. You're both at a critical stage, and I can't bear to leave you. If you want to go, husband, then go, Little Di said understandingly. Sister Jianing and I will take care of ourselves. Besides, Mother often comes to see us, and there are so many maids in the house. You stroked Little Di's long hair, lost in thought for a moment, but ultimately gave up the idea. No, on second thought, I won't go. You sighed. I was being too hasty. I forgot about the travel time. Even if I left today, on the fastest boat, it would take a month to get there. By the time I arrive, the spring planting will be over. What would I be going for? To watch them harvest the wheat. Besides, we have a lot to do here too. The projects at the 2 research institutes are at a critical stage. If I leave, who will guide them? So forget it. I'll just travel around the 8 commanderies of Hanyang. It's close, and I can keep an eye on both of you. All right then. Thank you, husband. Little Di shook her head happily and nuzzled your hand. You really had been too eager, always wanting to do everything yourself, forgetting that this wasn't an era of high-speed trains and airplanes. By the time you reached Bamboo Island, the Exian chief's body would probably be a dried-out piece of jerky. Pointless. Better to stay home and manage things remotely. Abandoning your plan to go south, you sat back down at your desk and began to write a reply, guiding Blooddrinker and Xue Qinyao in their next steps. Narrators aside, the war is over, but for our hero, the real war has just begun. On one side, 6 newly conquered commanderies, waiting to be rebuilt. On the other, 2 pregnant wives at home, waiting to be cared for. How to balance career and family is an eternal dilemma. But judging by our hero's skillful cat-petting technique, he seems to be handling his family relationships quite well. Indeed, a leader who doesn't want to be a good husband is not a good chief. First, the matter of administrative divisions. The name Bamboo Island had to go. One reason was to shed the stale air of the Exian tribe. The other was to make it sound more Hanifite. Plus, the island was simply too far from your political center, making it a pain to manage. So, in a flash of inspiration, you decided to introduce a brand new administrative unit, the province. Currently, your administration was structured in 4 levels: commandery, county, township, and village. But the number of commanderies was growing, and managing them all by yourself would eventually kill you. So, adding a province above the commandery, with one province overseeing several commanderies, was the perfect solution. Bamboo Island, isolated overseas with exactly 6 commanderies, was practically tailor-made for the concept of a province. What to call it? You stroked your chin, an idea sparking in your mind. Bamboo Island, located on the sea at the southernmost tip of the mainland, and a large island at that. Isn't that geographically Hainan Island? Then what was there to think about? Let's call it Xiong Province. Though the name was a blatant copy, it couldn't be helped. It was easy to remember. Why waste brain cells thinking of a new name when a perfectly good one was available? Not happening. Next was the appointment of officials. This too required drawing on historical experience. A province needed a supreme leader. You decided to create the position of inspector to represent you, the son of heaven, and shepherd the region. But history taught that the position of provincial inspector, with too much power, could easily lead to trouble, turning into a regional warlord. You didn't want the empire you had worked so hard to build to suddenly declare independence. Wouldn't that make you explode on the spot? So, military and civil power had to be separated. The inspector would manage civil affairs, and a protectorate general would be established to exclusively handle military matters. An inspectorate and a protectorate general, neither subordinate to the other, supervising and checking each other. Perfect. Once the personnel for the inspectorate and the protectorate general were sorted out, the rest was easy. Once Cheong province was stabilized, the next step was to pour in money and resources. The population and farmland were already there, and the farming tools were new. What was lacking now were seeds and a comprehensive management system. You scribbled down all the necessary instructions in a letter and had a set of official seals and robes for the inspectorate and protectorate general made overnight. Finally, you packed everything into a large bundle and handed it to your exclusive courier, the Azuka giant eagle. This thing could carry a deer, so a package was a piece of cake. With the reply sent, you summoned the captain of your personal guard and had him draft a victory report to be copied and spread to every corner of the Han tribe. You wanted all the people to share in the joy of this victory. A victory with no casualties, where the soldiers not only returned alive, but might also be promoted and get rich. This news was more joyous than the new year. After arranging these matters, you started to think about other things. The currency intended for circulation in Cheong province and the Tang tribe had already been shipped for almost a month. And there were seeds for grains, vegetables, silkworms, and cotton, and even breeding rabbits and pigs. All these had to be gathered and sent over immediately, so as not to delay next year's spring planting. But there was another problem. Who should be the commandery administrators for the 6 commanderies of Cheong province? The inspector was already decided, Xue Qingyao. The supreme commander of the protectorate general, the protector general of Cheong, you planned to give to Yang Feng. He had made great contributions in this war and knew Cheong province like the back of his hand. You trusted him. What about Blooddrinker? He definitely couldn't stay in Cheong. The Tiger's Might Guard was your ace in the hole and couldn't be without its leader. You planned to recall him and make him a governor back in the Han tribe homeland, in preparation for a future promotion to the Central Ministry of War. With that, the candidates for commandery administrator were a bit tight. You began to sift through the possibilities in your mind. The first to pop up was Anvil. He had been undercover in the Xian tribe for nearly 3 years and knew Cheong province inside and out. This time, he had led the militia in an uprising and had high prestige among the people. Making him a commandery administrator would be no problem. The second was Beast Tooth. But you quickly dismissed that idea. Beast Tooth had been away for 3 years. It was time for him to go home and reunite with his wife and children. And just like that, you were short on candidates again. Your mind raced. The Xian tribe's construction elder was Pro-Han. Though a bit old, he could be won over. Placing him as a figurehead would also help to stabilize the people's hearts. Yes, that one gets a checkmark. And another one, Oxtail. This fellow was a former commerce elder of the Xian tribe, fluent in several languages, had studied in the Han tribe, and had now been a county magistrate in your territory for over half a year. He was proficient in his duties. Sending him back to be a commandery administrator was a perfect fit. Good, another spot filled. Anvil, Oxtail, the construction elder. That's 3. As for the captured elders, the gold and platinum elders were the Xian chiefs' diehards. Keeping them around would only cause trouble. Better to just get rid of them. The millet, bean, and livestock elders were as timid as mice and in charge of agriculture and animal husbandry, which in theory made them suitable. But they were too old to learn new things, and they had caused you no small amount of trouble in the past. You found the thought of even keeping them as figureheads distasteful. Narrators aside, conquering an empire is hard. Ruling it is harder, and being the HR department for it is the hardest of all. Look at our heroes' moves, from top-level design to grassroots cadre selection, all clear and logical. A true masterclass in the self-cultivation of a startup CEO. But naming the new map, Cheong province. Isn't that a bit too obvious of a copy-paste job? Isn't he afraid of the history teacher knocking on his door in the middle of the night? Despite their relevant expertise, you considered elders Nami, Do, and Sheng unreliable for the post of prefect. After some thought, you decided to shuffle them off to the inspector's office's newly established Bureau of Farming and Herding to serve as consultants. Letting them put their remaining years to use chatting about the historical climate changes of Cheongzhou Island was one thing. But teaching agricultural and pastoral techniques? Forget it. The Han tribe's technology in those fields was already leagues beyond theirs, making their input redundant. By that count, you were still short 3 prefects. You rested your chin in your hand and began to sift through the talent pool in your mind. There was Jiang Xian of the Jiang clan. The young man had been with the Han tribe for over 2 years. He was fiercely loyal and possessed a deep love for Han culture. Though he was past the age for formal schooling, his sharp mind and eagerness to learn were irrepressible. He could now read and write Han characters with remarkable fluency. As a former tribal chief, he was well-versed in the demands of leadership. With a little support, he would be a perfect fit for a prefect's role. Absolutely. All right, Jiang Xian, on the list. Next, your thoughts turn to the Nian tribe, Zhang Ying's family, who had introduced glutinous rice to the Han. Zhang Mao, the former chief of the Nian tribe, had been working diligently these past few years. With Zhang Ying as a connection, they had no choice but to strive for progress. She was always there to keep them on their toes. Still, the nasty business of them nearly using Zhang Ying for a human sacrifice had always left a bad taste in your mouth, so you had never entrusted them with any significant responsibilities. But now was a time of need. Given their commendable conduct over the last few years, giving them a chance wasn't out of the question. Whether they could seize it, well, that was up to them. One last spot. You glanced through the roster of officials on your desk, and your eyes landed on the name Jing Yan. He was a clansman of Jing Yan, the current prefect of Dongxin Commandery, and had been mentored by him personally. He had served as a minor official under Jing Yan for years before being promoted to magistrate of Dachang County at the start of the year. His performance after a year in the post had been solid, marking him as a dependable official, a promising candidate for promotion. He would do. And just like that, the prefects for the 6 commanderies of Cheongzhou were tentatively decided. Niu Wei, Tai Zhun, Elder Zhu, Zhang Mao, Jiang Xian, and Jing Yun. Each of the 6 possessed unique strengths. Though several were novices in governance, they would suffice for the nascent administration of Cheongzhou, especially with the seasoned inspector Xue Qingyao overseeing them and diligent junior officials providing support. Having made your decision, you immediately summoned your personal guard, Chu Bing, with orders for Niu Wei, Zhang Mao, Jiang Xian, and Jing Yun to pack their belongings and prepare to assume their new posts. You even granted special permission for them to bring their families. After all, you couldn't expect them to endure long-term separation from their loved ones in such a distant land. As for Tai Zhun and Elder Zhu, they were already on Cheongzhou, so no travel was required. However, out of consideration for Tai Zhun, you specially arranged a ship to transport his family to him. The next afternoon, Niu Wei, Jiang Xian, and Zhang Mao arrived at your office in Hanyang City to report for duty. You kept your instructions brief, presenting them with their official robes and seals before dismissing them. Jing Yun was still in Dongxin Commandery. As the journey was too great for a special trip, the southbound fleet would simply collect him from the Dongxin docks en route. With these appointments settled, you departed for the Integrated Research Institute on Lakehart Island. This trip was twofold. First, to personally inspect the brand-new microscope, and second, to assign the Institute new research directives. After a day's travel, you finally arrived at the Institute and laid eyes on the fabled microscope. Ao Fei led you into the laboratory as if presenting a sacred treasure, launching into an effusive explanation. Chief, look. This is the optical microscope, built precisely to your specifications. The microscope was cast entirely from bronze, its surface gleaming with an ancient luster in the candlelight. Down here is the base, with a reflector I installed that has an adjustable angle. In the middle, you have the stage, complete with a condenser to focus light directly onto the slide. And this is the arm. And look here, he continued. The stage has 2 steel clips to hold the slide firmly in place. This knob here handles the coarse adjustments for the body tube's height. But this, he beamed, is the best part. Ao Fei pointed to the objective lenses, his face alight with excitement. I've fitted it with 6 objective lenses of varying magnifications, all housed in this small wooden box. To change one, you simply unscrew it by hand. What's more, each lens has its own small knob for fine-tuning the focus. It's an impressive piece of work, you remarked, nodding in satisfaction. How well does it perform? To be fair, the design was one you had sketched from memory of your middle school biology textbook, and its functions were largely the same. The only real difference was that changing lenses was a bit more cumbersome than with the revolving turrets of later models. Chief, would you like to try it yourself? Ao Fei invited boldly. I would, you nodded. What have you looked at with it so far? Ao Fei scratched his head. I've looked at the green fuzz on moldy rice. Magnified 1,600 times, it looked like peanut vines covered in tiny spheres. And my finger, skin that looked smooth, was actually full of ridges and valleys under the microscope. He rambled on, clearly having spent considerable time marveling at the hidden world revealed by his new toy. Have you observed any living organisms? You inquired. That, no. Aofe admitted honestly. All right then, you said with a wave of your hand. We'll talk about experiments later. I have a new idea. I want you to build a dedicated portrait camera, a super compact one. I want to begin issuing identification cards featuring photographic portraits. Identification cards with portraits? Aofe's eyes lit up instantly. For everyone. If this succeeded, his role in popularizing photography would surely be cemented in history. Only for adults, you explained. Children grow too fast, so it would be pointless. The primary purpose is to prevent forgery, to stop impersonation, welfare fraud, and other such problems. Understand. I see. Aofe slapped his thigh in a flash of understanding. So, what material do you plan to use for the cards, Chief? If we use photographic paper, the cost would be minimal, at least. Absolutely not. You shot down the idea immediately. Paper is too easy to forge and not durable enough. It would fall apart in a few years. Besides, what's the point if cameras become common and people can start faking their own? Using paper for IDs was cheap, certainly, but without plastic, you had no lamination technology. Preservation would be a massive headache. So, that plan was a non-starter. Then what are you proposing, Chief Metal? Aofe asked tentatively. Like the original silver plate wet collodion process. Exactly. You slapped your thigh. We'll use copper plates. We'll make them card-sized, plate a section in the top right with silver, and then use the wet collodion technique to develop the photo directly onto that silver layer. As for the personal details, we'll stamp the name, household registration, and rank with a steel die. You had already crunched the numbers. A single copper card would cost no more than 5 coins, the price of a meal. The amount of silver required for plating was practically negligible. I've thought it through, you continued. It's mandatory for all adults. The first one is free, paid for by the tribe. Any replacements after that, they pay for themselves. In 10 years, they will have established their lives. Who couldn't afford the price of a single meal by then? No problem at all. Aofe's mind raced. Silver plate photography is old hat for us. We just need to revive the technique. The camera will need a redesign though. The photo is small and off-center, so we'll have to rework the light path. Precisely. That's why I came to you. You nodded, satisfied. I'll be here for a few days. I want this device built within a week. In the meantime, I'm going to spend some quality time with that microscope of yours. Rest assured, Chief. Aofe thumped his chest with a resounding thwack. I won't need a week. 2 days. I'll have it for you in 2 days. Excellent. You led Aofe to the office, took out a pencil, and began sketching furiously on a piece of paper. The dimensions of the copper ID card were identical to the second-generation ID cards from your memory. The right side was for the silver-plated headshot. The left, from top to bottom, would list the name, gender, date of birth, place of origin, rank, and a unique identification number. The back would show the issuing authority and the expiration date. This device was worlds more advanced than the old household registers made of bamboo slips, and its anti-counterfeiting features were light years ahead. Aofe took the blueprint and immediately dispatched someone to begin producing a prototype. He himself hunkered down, completely absorbed in designing the new camera's structure. True to his word, everything was ready 2 days later. Aofe's new camera was assembled, and the mechanics team had fabricated a hand-operated stamping press. Of the several hundred pre-cut copper cards, 100 had already been silver-plated and polished. After a quick inspection, you gave the order. Begin the experiment. For the first subject, you designated Aofe himself. The photographer was your most experienced hand, Chu Bing. They returned to the bright optics lab. Aofe sat primly on a chair before the wide-open window. A sheet of silvery tin hung nearby as a reflector, bathing him in brilliant light. Chu Bing secured the camera, first adjusting the focus and position through the ground glass screen. Then he removed the screen and dashed into the adjacent darkroom to prepare the plate. In less than a minute, he emerged clutching a wet plate. He swiftly inserted it into the camera, pulled out the dark slide, shouted, "Look at the lens," at AO Fei, and then uncapped the lens to begin the exposure. 1, 2, 3, 8. 8 seconds. Perfect. Chu Bing swiftly replaced the lens cap, reinserted the dark slide, and, before the chemicals on the plate could dry, darted back into the darkroom like a gust of wind. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water, a single, fluid motion. The moment the shot was finished, AO Fei began pacing anxiously outside the darkroom door, looking for all the world like an expectant father outside a delivery room. Yu, however, remained perfectly calm, legs crossed, thinking, the worst that can happen is we waste one plate. Besides, I'm not the one doing the work. Soon, the wooden door of the darkroom creaked open. Chu Bing emerged, holding the copper card, still dewy with moisture. "Take a look, Chief. I think it's quite clear," he reported, beating AO Fei to the punch. "I just don't know how long this will last. I'm worried it won't stand up to wear and tear." AO Fei leaned in for a look. The photo was indeed sharp, the facial features clearly visible. "Let me see." You took the copper card and examined it closely. The framing of the photo was impeccable, a standard headshot from the hair down to the collarbone, capturing the entire face and neck with great clarity. But just as Chu Bing had pointed out, its durability was a major concern. You stared at the photo for a moment, then instructed, "All right, let's do this. Make 10 more, exactly like this one. We'll run a comparative experiment on abrasion and light exposure to see how they hold up." "An excellent idea." AO Fei nodded vigorously. Experimentation is always the safest path. As a man of research, he deeply subscribed to your philosophy of bold hypotheses, careful verification. The two of them quickly got busy again, huffing and puffing as they produced 9 more identical photographs. You randomly selected one and placed it in a sealed wooden box for safekeeping. The remaining 9 were all subjected to destructive testing. Voiceover. From microscopes to ID cards, our protagonist's technology tree is branching out in increasingly strange yet practical directions. With this single move, he has catapulted the Han tribe's household registration system from the bamboo slip era into a quasi-information age. Still, using the inventor as the subject and the bodyguard as the photographer. "Chief, your resourcefulness is truly second to none." You barked out the orders. "Chu Bing, gather a few of the personal guards. Have them wipe the photos with linen, cotton, and silk, respectively. I want everyone to record the number of strokes. One group will conduct the friction test indoors. Another will take theirs outside into the bright sunlight to do the same. The last group will soak their cloths in a light saltwater solution and rub the photos in the sunlight to simulate sweating on a hot day." "Yes, sir. No problem." Chu Bing agreed readily. "I'll find some carbide lamps to use as a strong light source." AO Fei promptly assigned himself a task. You nodded, satisfied. The two immediately went their separate ways. The torture test of the 9 photographs had officially begun. To be fair, a silver plate photograph was remarkably tough. Its image was infused directly into the silver layer, not merely resting on the surface like an albumin print. Therefore, in terms of both longevity and durability, the silver plate photo should blow the albumin print out of the water. You watched them grunt and scrape at the photos for a while and found yourself growing bored. Who knew how long this would take? So, you decided to use the downtime to inspect the chemistry team's explosives workshop. This small workshop was under immense pressure. First, it was a high-risk industry. One wrong move, and the entire team could be sent to meet their makers. They were responsible for producing the primers and propellants needed by the army, as well as mass-producing diethyl ether. This ether was both a catalyst for synthesizing propellants and a powerful anesthetic. A single whiff could knock a person out cold. For this reason, the ether workshop was built like a shed, open on all 4 sides, with more windows than walls, all for the sake of ventilation. Even so, the workers had to wear full-coverage gas masks that resembled elephant trunks just to enter. That contraption was a unique product from the Research Institute's rubber division, something you couldn't find anywhere else. Normally, no one from the Institute dared to venture near, as the entire workshop was permeated with the sweet, cloying smell of ether. It was said that one could often find water birds near the workshop, rendered unconscious by the fumes. But while the work was dangerous, the the pay you offered was generous. Wages were triple the average income, with an additional bonus for a full month without accidents. Great rewards brought forth brave men. The workers were meticulous, strictly adhering to operating procedures, terrified that one careless slip would blow up their livelihood. Besides munitions, this workshop was also responsible for preparing the chemicals for photography, especially the silver nitrate solution. This substance was not only essential for taking pictures, but also a key material for making silver-backed glass mirrors. Now that silvered mirrors were becoming popular throughout the Han tribe, silver nitrate was suddenly a hot commodity. "Looks like we need to expand production again," you muttered to yourself after the tour. Otherwise, forget popularizing cameras for civilian use. Just producing the photos for the ID cards would be enough to overwhelm them. Leaving the explosives workshop, you ambled back to the lab, ready to personally investigate the microscope. You had to verify for yourself whether A.O. Fei's creation could truly achieve a magnification of 1,600 times. How to verify it? Simple. Examine blood. You called A.O. Fei over, preparing to make him your guinea pig. "Chief, you want to look at blood with this microscope?" A.O. Fei looked uncertain. "Of course. Aren't you curious what's in blood? Perhaps there are moving things?" you teased. "This." A.O. Fei thought about it and actually shivered. "Hearing you say that, I'm suddenly a little scared." You then asked him how he had photographed the mold last time. A.O. Fei fished a tiny, tube-shaped camera out of a drawer and demonstrated. The device had a tube for a lens that fit perfectly over the microscope's eyepiece. A glass negative was placed at the back. It was a point-and-shoot operation, easy enough to grasp at a glance. Your interest piqued. You decided to take the helm yourself. First, you adjusted the reflector, letting the sunlight flood the stage. Then, you grabbed an unlucky personal guard, pricked his finger with a needle, collected a drop of blood on a slide, and covered it with a cover slip. A fresh human blood specimen was thus successfully prepared. You secured the specimen on the stage and started at 500 times magnification. Against a white background, countless tiny dark specks swam erratically within a halo of light. "A.O. Fei, come quick," you called out excitedly. "We can see things at just 500 times. Look, all these little dots swimming in human blood." Upon hearing this, A.O. Fei shivered from head to toe. But at your enthusiastic invitation, he timidly leaned over for a look. The result? The young man let out a yelp and stumbled backward, cold sweat instantly beading on his forehead. His face turned deathly pale, and goosebumps erupted on his arms. "What's wrong?" you asked, confused. "It's just some moving dots. Is it that scary?" Chief. A.O. Fei leaned on the table, taking a long moment to recover before stammering. I think I feel sick whenever I see densely packed things, and if they're moving, it makes me feel even worse." "Holy hell," you muttered under your breath, speechless. "This guy has trypophobia." You never would have guessed that the Han tribe's most brilliant optical physicist had such a condition, and a severe one at that. It seemed the microscope was not for him. So, you let him off the hook, sending him to supervise the ID card friction test. You then continued on your own, fiddling with this marvelous instrument that could peer into the microscopic world. Voiceover. Who would have thought that the man who lit up the Han tribe's optical technology tree was a trypophobe? This must be the legendary, "I created the thing I fear most," right? The delightful contrast is just perfect. I wonder if A.O. Fei will develop a psychological complex every time he sees a microscope from now on. At 500 times magnification, you could already see the little dark specks swimming in the blood. But you knew full well this was far from enough. Blood contained red cells, white cells, and platelets. 500 times magnification was clearly insufficient to distinguish them properly. So, you snapped a picture with the tube camera, then switched to the 1,000-power objective lens. The world under the microscope instantly sharpened. The biconcave, disc-shaped red blood cells appeared before your eyes. Their shape was remarkably like the dried persimmon cakes you used to eat, round and flat, quite charming. As for the white blood cells and platelets, they were less distinct, resembling blobs of snot with numerous tentacles extending from them. Still, 1,000 times magnification wasn't enough to fully differentiate between them. You snapped another picture and then switched directly to the most powerful objective, 1,600 times. After the switch, you remained a little disappointed. Under normal circumstances, you'd need at least 3,000 times magnification to clearly observe white blood cells or platelets. To see the nucleus inside, you would need to start at 5,000. That level of magnification was a distant dream for the Han tribe right now. It seems the microscope's utility is still quite limited for now, you thought to yourself. You took another photo of the blood sample at 1,600 times magnification, then began cleaning up the lab equipment. Taking the 3 freshly developed glass negatives, you found Chu Bing and instructed him to develop the photos, enlarge them, and deliver them to the faculty at the medical college to broaden their horizons. Meanwhile, in the optics lab, the 3 experimental groups were still grunting and straining at their destructive tests. Manual friction was hard labor. Several of the personal guards' arms were aching, but thankfully, there were enough of them to take turns, ensuring the experiment continued without interruption. The moment you returned, you went straight to A.O. Fei. What's the status? How many times have they been rubbed? Reporting to the chief. A.O. Fei hurried over. We've already rotated the teams twice. All 3 groups have surpassed 100,000 rubs. 100,000? That should be sufficient, you mused, calling a halt to the experiment. A.O. Fei quickly brought over the 3 sets of tortured ID cards, not only sorted into groups, but also labeled with detailed experimental data. He even thoughtfully handed you a magnifying glass for your personal inspection. The results were much as you expected. The first group, rubbed in the darkroom, showed the most wear from the linen cloth, but the overall color change was minimal. The second group, rubbed under strong light, had already started to yellow, and the image had become blurry. The third group, rubbed with cloths soaked in salt water under strong light, yielded a surprising result. The clarity of the photo was actually better than that of the second group. Could salt water somehow reduce light sensitivity? You didn't dwell on the question. Overall, the wear on all the ID cards was severe. The only commonality was that the card rubbed with silk suffered the least damage. But providing a silk sleeve for every citizen's ID card was far too impractical. You mulled it over and finally decided to add a copper cover to the ID card. It would be fashioned in the style of a bifold booklet. The front cover would be stamped with the words Han Empire Citizen Identification Card, and a raised section would be pressed over the photo area to protect it. That way, it would be shielded from both light and abrasion. The cost doubled, but it was still less than 1/10 of a silver coin, a price you could easily afford. And so, the plan for the ID cards was finalized. You immediately returned to Hanyang City with your personal guards and notified the prefects of every commandery to prepare for a new census and the issuance of the new ID cards. The Research Institute was now under immense pressure. You demanded that all the necessary equipment be ready before the year's end, as you were waiting for the census results to make some big moves in the new year. Also preparing to make big moves were the trio far away on Xiongzhou. Xue Qingyao, Xue Tu, and Yang Feng had already received your reply. An Azuka giant eagle had brought them a large parcel containing official seals, letters of appointment, and everything else they required. The letter was lengthy. It began by announcing that Bamboo Island was to be renamed Xiongzhou Island. Then, it clearly defined the authority of the provincial inspector and the grand marshal, as well as the appointments for the 6 commandery prefects. In the letter, you appointed Xue Qingyao as the inspector of Xiongzhou, ordering him to proceed immediately to Yashan Commandery, establish the inspector's office, and receive the ceremonial staff from Shoya as a token of his authority. Yang Feng was appointed Grand Marshal of Xiongzhou. He was to receive the ceremonial battle axe from Xue Tu, proceed to Jiahai Commandery, establish the Grand Marshal's office, and take command of all military affairs in the province. As for Xue Tu, you ordered him to lead the Tiger Stallion Guard back to Tuahai Commandery to rest and regroup. This regrouping meant rest, training, and taking turns going on leave to visit their families. You specifically instructed that the soldiers of the Tiger Stallion Guard be granted home leave. With a full year, there would be ample time for everyone to return home and see their families. Voiceover. From the microscopic world of cells to the macroscopic world of administration, our protagonist's brain operates like a supercomputer, multitasking without a hint of pressure. But the most impressive move of all is granting the Tiger Stallion Guard a year of paid home leave. A benefit like that is one of a kind in all of ancient history. Other transmigrators should be taking notes. This is what you call a people-first corporate culture. The letter, sealed with wax, exuded an unassailable authority in every line. It specifically instructed Xue Tu to hand over the 20 big babies the Tiger Stallion Guard had dragged along. The dark, gleaming cannons that radiated a deadly chill to Yang Feng's Grand Marshal's office, along with their artillery crews. The deployment was also laid out with perfect clarity. 8 cannons were to be stationed at Jiahai Commandery's Shadow Bridge, ready to blast anyone who dared cross into oblivion. Another 8 were to be hauled to the port in Yashan Commandery to act as coastal guardians and project power. The remaining 4, Yang Feng could do with as he pleased. Whether he wanted to set them off like fireworks or use them to crack walnuts was entirely up to him. Beyond that were the formal letters of appointment for Xue Qingyao, Yang Feng, and the others, as well as several bulging personal letters. Xue Qingyao's was the thickest. Opening it, he found it was filled with the chiefs nagging about how to govern Qiongzhou Island. The core idea was singular: haul out the old guard from the Xian tribe for a public trial and stabilize the hearts of the common people. Then, immediately and without delay, resettle the displaced populace and follow that with a comprehensive, island-wide survey. Population, land, property, local products, not a single detail could be missed. After all, if you didn't even know how many people or how much land you had, what kind of government could you possibly run? Regarding the public trial, the letter also offered some kind and friendly suggestions. Elders Huangjin and Baiyin of the Xian tribe had to die. They were die-hard fanatics of the former chieftain, and leaving them alive would only spell trouble. But before the axe fell, every last drop of information about mineral veins hidden in their minds had to be squeezed out. As for elders Mi, Do, and Sheng, they were of little use. The Han tribe's agricultural techniques were light years ahead of theirs, a dimensional beatdown. But these 3 old men were Qiongzhou Island's human weather vanes, more familiar with the local climate than anyone. Therefore, the suggestion was to keep them. After the public trial, Xue Qingyao was to take them away and install them as mascots in the inspector's office's Bureau of Farming and Herding, where they could drink tea, chat, and incidentally collect climate data. And Elder Zhu? He'd hit the jackpot, being made a prefect straight away. Who could blame him? He'd been making overtures to the Han from the start, a staunch, pro-Han advocate. The 3 men finished the letter and exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. Work could wait. First, protocol. Time for some mutual flattery. Xue Tu cupped his fist with the swagger of a grand general, his voice booming. Congratulations, Brother Xue, and you too, Brother Yang. This is a meteoric rise. A boundless future awaits. Not at all, not at all. The 2 men waved their hands in frantic modesty, like model students. Xue Qingyao's eyes darted. He immediately grabbed Xue Tu's arm and said with heartfelt sincerity, Brother Tu, you misspeak. We all know you are the one closest to the chief's heart. Yang Feng and I were merely appointed in a time of crisis. Our hearts are pounding with uncertainty. For the chief to summon you back, there must be a matter of monumental importance awaiting you. The words were steeped in emotional intelligence, simultaneously elevating Xue Tu and calming any unease. Yang Feng quickly chimed in. Indeed, indeed. Brother Tu, you led the campaign to pacify Bamboo Island, expanding the territory of our Han tribe. A feat greater than the heavens. When you return, won't your position be higher than ours? Brother Tu, just you wait and see. Xue Tu saw it all as clear as day. He knew exactly what this pair of jesters was up to with their little duet. When it came to administration, 10 of him couldn't match one Xue Qingyao. He'd rather take a blade to the gut than engage in the political machinations of those old foxes. As for guarding a territory, Qiongzhou Island was at peace. Making him a grand marshal to drill troops day in and day out would bore him to sickness. He chuckled, a small thrill building inside him. The chief gets me, he thought. He didn't have to say a word. He knew these 2 positions would be a pain in my ass. He must have something more exciting saved for me. Xue Tu speculated silently. What could it be? I'm actually a little excited to find out. He waved a hand, cutting off their flattery. All right, stop with the sweet talk. I know my own worth, and I'll follow the chief's arrangements. Let's get down to business. I suggest. Xue Qingyao immediately switched to the topic at hand. We summon the heads of all the garrisons for a grand assembly. We'll announce the chief's appointments and directives on the spot and execute them on the spot. What do you think? Agreed. No problem. That's the fastest and most efficient way. Xue Tu and Yang Feng nodded in unison, sealing the decision. 2 days later, at noon, Jiahai Commandery, Central Army Camp. The messenger's horses had nearly run their hooves raw, but they had finally gathered everyone. Not only were all the commandants and garrison adjutants from the 6 garrisons present, but Shoya, Tai Zhun, and the special prisoners, elders Zhu, Mi, Do, and Sheng, had also been summoned.